There is something most people never realize about attraction and intimacy. It is not created in big dramatic moments. It is built in the smallest conversations that feel almost ordinary at first. The way you ask a question, the way you listen without interrupting, the way you make someone feel safe without even trying too hard, these are the real foundations of emotional closeness. But here is where things get interesting. Many women want deeper connection with a man. They want him to open up, to feel close, to feel present, yet they often don't know how to start that kind of conversation without it feeling awkward, forced, or like they might get rejected emotionally. So instead, they stay in surface talk, hoping time will create intimacy on its own. But real connection doesn't grow by waiting. It grows by knowing how to guide it gently. Because men are not closed by nature. They are careful. They open up when they feel understood, not when they feel questioned. And the difference between those two things changes everything in a relationship. One creates distance. The other creates attraction. So what if you could learn a way of speaking that doesn't push, doesn't chase, but naturally draws him closer? A way of asking questions that feels light on the surface but deep in emotion. A way that makes a man feel seen, not studied. In this script, we are going to explore exactly that. Not manipulation, not games, but emotional intelligence in conversation. Because when you understand how connection really works, you stop chasing intimacy and start creating it naturally. When it comes to building real emotional closeness, the first shift is very simple but very powerful. Stop asking questions that only touch the surface and start asking questions that touch the state of his mind. Most people ask, "How was your day?" And the conversation ends right there or turns into a boring summary of events. It stays on facts, not feelings. But attraction and intimacy don't grow from facts. They grow from emotional awareness. So instead of staying at that basic level, you gently change the direction of the question. You ask things like, what part of your day felt the most peaceful? Or when did you feel stressed today? Or even, was there a moment today where you felt proud of yourself? These are small changes in wording, but they create a completely different emotional response. Suddenly, he is not just telling you what he did, he is starting to reflect on how he felt while doing it. And this is where something important happens. Most men are not used to being asked about their emotions in a simple, natural way. They are used to solving problems, handling responsibilities, and staying strong. So when you ask a question that invites him to talk about his inner world without pressure, it feels different for him. It feels safe, not intense, not demanding, just open. This is where connection quietly begins. Because when a man starts sharing how he felt instead of only what he did, he is no longer just speaking to you, he is sharing himself with you. And that shift is where emotional closeness starts to form without either person forcing it. But the key is tone. You don't ask like an interview. You ask like someone who genuinely cares without expecting a perfect answer. You listen without correcting, without rushing, without trying to fix anything. You simply receive what he says. Over time, this becomes a pattern. He starts to feel that talking to you is not pressure, it is relief, not judgment, but understanding. And in relationships, emotional relief is one of the strongest forms of attraction, because people are naturally drawn to the place where they feel lighter, not heavier. So this first point is not just about a question. It is about changing the entire energy of communication, from surface level interaction to emotional presence. And when that shift happens consistently, intimacy doesn't need to be chased. It starts to grow on its own. Respect is one of those things that doesn't always get talked about in a simple way, but it quietly sits at the center of how a man connects emotionally in a relationship. Not just respect in the formal sense, but emotional respect. The feeling of being valued, understood, and taken seriously for who he is, not just what he does. And when you learn how to bring this into conversation naturally, something shifts in the connection without any pressure or force. So instead of guessing what makes him feel respected, you simply ask him in a calm and open way. Something like, what makes you feel truly respected in a relationship? Or what does respect look like to you personally? This kind of question does something interesting. It doesn't accuse, it doesn't demand, and it doesn't assume. it invites. And when a man feels invited into a deeper conversation about himself, he naturally opens up more than he normally would. Most men don't get asked this question in everyday life. They are often expected to just be responsible, to perform, to provide, to handle things quietly. Over time, they may stop expressing what actually makes them feel valued. So when a woman gently asks about it, it creates a moment of emotional pause. He starts thinking in a deeper way, not just reacting in a quick way. And here is where emotional connection starts to grow. When he explains what respect means to him, he is actually revealing his inner emotional structure. Maybe for him, respect means being listened to without interruption. Maybe it means being trusted with decisions. Maybe it means not being compared or criticized in small moments. Whatever his answer is, it gives you insight into what makes him feel safe and secure emotionally. But the real power is not just in hearing the answer, it is in how you respond. You don't judge it. You don't debate it. You simply acknowledge it with understanding. Because the moment a man feels that his emotional truth is not being challenged, but accepted, he relaxes. And relaxation in a relationship is where deeper attraction starts to form naturally. Respect is also closely tied to emotional confidence. When a man feels respected, he feels more open, more expressive, and more willing to share things he normally keeps inside. That is because respect removes emotional pressure. It tells him, you don't have to prove yourself here. And that message is powerful in any relationship. Over time, this one question becomes more than just a conversation starter. It becomes a bridge. A bridge that helps him feel seen not just as a partner, but as a person. And when a man feels that kind of emotional respect consistently, he doesn't just stay connected physically or casually, he becomes emotionally present. And emotional presence is what turns ordinary relationships into deeply bonded ones. Everyone has a side of themselves they don't show to the world, not because they are hiding something wrong, but because those thoughts feel too personal, too soft, or sometimes too uncertain to say out loud. These are what we can call quiet dreams. And when you bring this into a relationship conversation in a gentle way, you open a door that many people never get to open in their life. Instead of asking something direct like, what are your goals? Which can feel formal or even pressure-based, you go a layer deeper and softer. You ask something like, what's something you've always wanted to do, but haven't really told many people? Or is there a dream you still think about, even if you never talk about it? These kinds of questions don't demand an answer. They invite honesty. And that invitation is what makes the difference. For a man, this kind of question can feel surprisingly meaningful. Most of the time, his life is built around responsibility, routine, and expectations. He is used to being asked what he is doing, what he is planning, what he has achieved, but he is not often asked what he still wishes for, and that small difference changes the entire emotional direction of the conversation. When he starts talking about his quiet dreams, something subtle happens. He is no longer speaking from his role in life. He is speaking from his inner self. Maybe he talks about a passion he left behind. Maybe he mentions a place he wants to visit. Maybe it's a simple dream like living a calmer life, starting something small, or just having more freedom. Whatever it is personal. And personal expression builds emotional closeness very quickly. What makes this even more powerful is how you respond. You don't minimize it, you don't rush it, you don't turn it into advice immediately. You simply listen with interest and warmth, because the goal here is not to fix his dream. The goal is to let him feel that his inner world is safe with you. And when someone feels safe sharing their quiet dreams, they start associating you with emotional comfort. They feel like they don't have to hide parts of themselves anymore. This is where trust deepens in a natural way. Not through effort, but through understanding. Over time, this kind of conversation builds something strong. He begins to open up more often, not because he is asked to, but because he feels comfortable doing it. And that comfort slowly turns into emotional closeness. Because people don't bond deeply through perfect conversations, they bond through honest ones. So this point is really about one simple shift: giving space for the unspoken parts of a person to exist in the relationship. When that space is created, Connection becomes deeper, more real, and much more meaningful than surface level talk ever could be. Every person connects in a slightly different way, but most people never take the time to actually understand how that connection works for the person they care about. They assume love is the same for everyone, but it's not. Some people feel close through conversation, some through time spent together, some through small acts of care, and others through emotional support during difficult moments. That's why this point is so important. It's about learning his emotional language instead of guessing it. So instead of trying to show connection in a way that feels natural to you, you gently ask him something like, when do you feel most connected to someone? Or what makes you feel truly close to a person? This is not a heavy question. It's a thoughtful one. And it helps you understand something very important. What actually creates emotional safety for him? When a man is asked this in a calm, non-judgmental way, he starts to reflect in a deeper manner than usual. He may realize things about himself he hasn't clearly put into words before. For example, he might say he feels close when someone listens without interrupting, or when someone supports him without trying to control him, or when there is calm understanding instead of constant pressure. These answers are small on the surface, but they carry deep emotional meaning. And once you know this, everything changes quietly in the relationship. Because now you are not guessing what works. You are learning what works directly from him. And when you respond to him in his emotional language, he starts to feel something very rare. Being understood in the way he actually needs, not just the way others assume. This creates a kind of emotional ease. He doesn't have to explain himself repeatedly. He doesn't have to feel misunderstood. Instead, he starts to feel that being with you is simple, not complicated. And simplicity in emotional connection is powerful because it removes resistance. What makes this even more important is consistency. It's not just about asking once and forgetting it. It's about slowly adjusting how you connect with him based on what you learn. If he values calm presence, you bring calmness. If he values communication, you create space for talking. If he values support, you show up in small, supportive ways without overdoing it. This alignment builds trust over time. And when a man feels that someone understands how he naturally connects, he becomes more open without needing to be pushed. He starts engaging more emotionally because it feels right, not because it is required. That is where real closeness begins to grow. So this point is not about control or strategy, it is about awareness. Because once you understand how someone connects, you stop forcing connection and start flowing with it. And that flow is where emotional intimacy comes to stable, real, and long-lasting. Every relationship goes through moments where one person pulls back a little. It doesn't always mean something is wrong. Sometimes it's stress, sometimes it's pressure from life, sometimes it's just emotional overload. But the problem is not the distance itself. It's how people react to it. Most reactions come from fear, overthinking, chasing, questioning too much, or assuming the worst. And instead of creating closeness again, it often creates more distance. This is why this final point is so important. Instead of reacting to distance with anxiety, you approach it with calm understanding. You ask something like, when you feel a bit distant or quiet, what usually helps you feel better? Or do you like space in those moments, or do you prefer support? These are not controlling questions. They are caring ones. They show maturity and emotional awareness without pressure. When a man is asked this in a peaceful way, he doesn't feel judged for withdrawing. He doesn't feel like he has to defend himself. Instead, he feels understood. And that alone changes everything. Because one of the biggest reasons people pull away further is because they feel misunderstood in their silence. But when silence is met with understanding instead of fear, the emotional pressure reduces immediately. What this question really does is open a conversation about emotional needs during difficult moments. And every person handles distance differently. Some men need a little space to reset their thoughts. Others prefer a calm check-in without too many questions. Some just want normal energy without emotional pressure. When you understand this, you stop guessing and start responding correctly. And here's where the deeper transformation happens. When a man sees that his quiet moments are not being turned into conflict, he starts to trust the relationship on a deeper level because he learns something important. I can be myself here, even when I'm not fully expressive. That feeling creates emotional safety, and emotional safety is what keeps people connected long term. The key is not to panic when distance shows up, it's to stay steady. Not cold, not overbearing, just steady. And that steadiness communicates something powerful without words. That connection does not depend on constant attention, it depends on understanding. Over time, this approach changes the emotional pattern between two people. Instead of distance creating fear, it becomes something manageable. Instead of silence creating assumptions, it becomes something respected. And instead of emotional pressure building up, it gets replaced with trust. So this final point is really about emotional control in the healthiest sense, not controlling the other person, but controlling your response. Because when you respond with calm curiosity instead of fear, you create a space where closeness can return naturally. And that is what turns unstable connection into a strong, emotionally mature relationship. At the end of the day, real intimacy is not built in big moments. It's built in the small emotional spaces people create between each other. It's in the way you ask, the way you listen, and the way you respond when someone slowly starts to open up. Most people think closeness comes from time alone, but the truth is, time only works when there is emotional understanding inside it. Without that, even long relationships can feel distant. What we talked about today is not about tricks or controlling anyone's feelings. It's about awareness. It's about learning how connection actually works in real life. When you start asking better questions, you stop guessing and start understanding. And when understanding becomes the foundation, relationships naturally become lighter, calmer, and more meaningful. But the most important thing to remember is this: you don't need to force emotional closeness. You just need to create the right space for it, a space where someone feels safe to speak, safe to be quiet, and safe to be themselves without pressure. Because when that safety is there, people don't run away from connection. They move closer to it. So take this with you. Don't focus on perfect words. Focus on honest presence. Don't chase responses. Create comfort. And don't rush intimacy. Allow it to grow naturally through understanding. If this message made you think differently about relationships, then you already know you're on the right path. Because emotional intelligence is not something you learn once. It's something you build slowly through experience. And the more you practice this kind of communication, the more you'll realize something powerful. Real connection was never about doing more. It was always about understanding deeper.